In this video, we are breaking down the villain who is Wilbur Soot. I've looked at all 40 plus members of the Dream SMP and created a list of 8 villains, and I've set out with the goal of being able to label one character as the greatest villain of the Dream SMP. We've already looked at the previous 7, and today is the final video before we label the greatest of all time. But first, we are going to break down the villainy of Wilbur Soot. This series has taken a crazy amount of time and effort to make, so if you would subscribe, that would mean the world to me. In addition to that, we still have the final ranking video that comes out after this, so make sure that you have notifications on so that way you know the moment that it drops. It'll be coming out a few days after this video, so I mean you could always just check back then too, I guess. Anyway, let's go! For the final time, let me break down the way that we are going to break down Wilbur's character. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been putting timestamps on the video so you can skip to the part where I explain the grading system. I mean, this of course entails that I actually remember to do that, you know. 50-50. I might have, I might not have. I'll just leave it there. You'll have to let me know. If I forgot, just berate me in the comments. I don't care. In order to make sure that we are looking at all the villains in an equal light, we're going to be breaking them down against a scale made by Masterclass. They wrote an article on what makes a great villain, and in that article they listed 5 points: a strong connection to the hero, clear morality, a worthy opponent, compelling backstory, and that the villains should be fun. As always, if you don't fully understand one of these points right away, don't worry, because by the end of the video we will have each one clearly explained. Before we can dive into those 5 points, we must determine whether or not Wilbur is actually a villain, or if he's the hero. This was tough, because for most of his story, Wilbur is actually a hero. When the story of the Dream SMP truly began, Wilbur was a hero. Or was he? He created the nation of L'Manberg, a nation that would go on to be the driving force behind the protagonist organization. But as we all know, Wilbur eventually went mad and blew the nation up. This makes for some beautiful character development that we're going to break down later, but at the end of the day, Wilbur was a villain. He ended his story with wrongful destruction, and did so by leading the heroes along a string of hope that he knew he himself would cut. That was poetic. I just made that sentence up on the spot. That deserves a like. We're in the moment again. Same thing women tell me. What is Wilbur's connection to the hero? In the case of Wilbur, he is connected to 2 main heroes of the story: L'Manberg and Tommy. L'Manberg was Wilbur's brainchild. It was created not to be a beacon of peace and freedom, but as a refuge, a sanctuary for the non-Americans. As for Tommy, Wilbur shared his ideals, his morals, his hopes, and his dreams with him. They grew together. Their ideals and paths converged, but their stories wove the structure for both of them moving forward. When it comes to a clear morality, Wilbur's is slightly complicated. It's complicated because it changes. When Wilbur begins, he's full of hope and the desire to succeed. When it ends, he's hopeless, and the desire for success has warped his feelings into something where he needs to destroy his creation since he failed it. We see this change happen slowly over time, or do we? The main part of a character's morality being strong lies in whether or not it could be seen as a valid reason. Wilbur abandons his creation to the point that he blows it up. But is this believable? Would someone actually get to the point where doing this is even somewhat justified? Well, here's the harsh part with Wilbur's character. No. You can understand his idea at the moment he presses his button. Mine completely warped into believing that this was the only option, except Wilbur didn't get to that point after Techno spawned the Withers. In fact, he was at that point before Techno even joined the server. Wilbur chose to blow it up very quickly after being exiled from his nation. When you recognize this, his morality weakens a lot. No longer is Wilbur a character with a complicated morality, but he becomes a character who lost his toy and would rather destroy it than see anyone else play with it. It's the proverbial, if I can't enjoy it the way I want to, no one can. With that in mind, we now jump to whether or not Wilbur is a good opponent, and I'll keep this short. No. Wilbur's only true opponent is opportunity. The opportunity to blow the nation up with everyone watching. Wilbur wants to be seen as a martyr for a noble cause, but that's simply not the case. He has no true opponent because no one truly tries to stop him. He becomes a side note to Tommy's attempts to take L'Manberg back from Schlatts. But how about for the backstory? When Wilbur joined the Dream SMP, he immediately started a business with a monopoly on drugs, as one does, I guess. From this, he developed a new nation. He took true ownership of it by fighting for its freedom. He then rose to power as a self-proclaimed president, ran for an election, and when he lost power, he decided that the nation needed to go. You see, what makes a good backstory is its credibility. If it's not believable, if the actions that the villain carries out aren't in line with the path the backstory takes them, then a lot of the validity is gone. You see, the backstory is the spine that supports the villain's morality. With Wilbur, his backstory is mostly there, but there's a huge gap where he goes from being exiled to wanting to destroy L'Manberg. Now, I keep harping on this point, and I think I've made it clear that the plot hole there is pretty big, so let's not get too caught up in it. It's a gap gap, yes, but aside from this one gap, the backstory actually fairly well lines up. I mean, without it, if Wilbur had played his character out longer, then we would have seen Wilbur more truly realize the nation he once made could not be saved. But that's the issue. It could have been, but he was way too blind to see it. At the end of the day, the backstory does have a gigantic glaring hole, but it's quite solid in every other area. The final aspect that makes a good villain is whether or not the villain is fun. Do they grab your attention and do they pull you in? And Wilbur does this phenomenally well. Wilbur Soot as a person has an incredibly good way with words. His confidence and articulation give him an astounding ability to convey what he believes in a way that even if you disagree with him, you can understand where he stands. In fact, you can almost believe that he's right. Almost. And that's the wonder of Wilbur's character. He's obviously in the wrong, but he's so convicted that it frustrates you. He's the person that you want to talk some sense to, but they're so narrow-minded and focused on their self-made truth that they won't even listen. Wilbur wouldn't listen to Tommy, and that frustrated the crap out of us. It made us desperately want to intervene so that Wilbur wouldn't blow up L'Manberg. And when he did, we truly got our hearts broken just like everyone else. Wilbur pulled genuine emotion out of us, and that's what makes him such a sensational villain. And that's Wilbur, an incredibly well-played villain. Let me know in the comments if you think that Wilbur was right, or if he was completely wrong. This was the final villain analysis before we break down and name the greatest Dream SMP villain of all time. So if you haven't watched the previous videos, go give them a look. That way you're completely caught up to date. I put a crazy amount of effort into this series, so please consider subscribing and leaving a like, because that would mean so much to me. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in a few days for the finale. I cannot wait. Adios!